tonight's rescues are true stories of the New Year's storms that blew in 1998. Some were filmed as they happened, for others we've used actors, but all are based on the accounts of the people involved.
I thought I was going to die. I just said, please God, don't let me die.
We'd been warned that the boat may sink at any minute. It was still there, but we didn't know how long we had.
Little did we know, 2 or 3 days after New Year, that Jane would be in a life or death situation.
They just come from nowhere, just all of a sudden, it happened.
Suddenly, the door burst open with a tremendous bang, and things started pouring in.
Good evening to you. Well, first of all, a warning for drivers of low-flying sleighs on Christmas Eve. It is going to be very windy, and we're going to find gale force winds sweeping up across the country.
I think your emotions change because suddenly this fantasy became reality. There was my house completely devastated.
The weather was a bit strange just after Christmas. We had lightning strikes, we had flooding, we had the tornado. I think we had everything.
The New Year storms peaked on the south coast, on the normally quiet peninsula of Selsey. The people here witnessed the kind of devastating weather phenomenon they thought they'd only ever see in the cinema. But the story started on Christmas Eve 1997, when, unlike the big October hurricane of 10 years previously, the weather forecasters accurately predicted the first arrival of 110-mile-an-hour winds.
So gale force winds for many of us. Looks like we'll see some wet weather pushing further north again on Christmas Eve. The isobars there tightly packed. There could even be severe gale force.
The weather was pretty atrocious. We'd all prefer to be off with our families. However, we have to man the flight 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We've tried to have a big Christmas lunch, but of course this year it was interrupted.
Go ahead. We've got an EPIRB going off.
On Christmas Eve we were called because there was a beacon going off. We were relieving a Navy crew that were already out from Culdrose, who'd been searching for a trawler that had sunk, and we found the beacon. And shortly afterwards, using night vision goggles, we found some debris in the water, including the wheelhouse.
The search for the missing crew continued into Christmas Day, hampered by the hurricane-force winds which battered sea defences. On the south coast, 10 miles east of the Isle of Wight, Selsey took its first hammering, and one family had an unusually close view.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful.
I live on the west side of Selsey, which is also nicknamed Windy City. It does tend to create a little bit of a hoolie when the elements get up.
The weather is something else.
Moment's pride.
It can change so quick, you can get a nice sea mist rolling in very quickly. Even though you're having to fight to hang on to the door to open it half the time, it is very nice.
This Christmas, what I remember is lining up chairs along the front of our lounge window for friends to pop in and watch. And in fact, Jeremy was outside with a window blade so we could get a clearer view.
Seeing it coming across the field and slamming up against the lounge window, and all right, making a joke of it, but it certainly wasn't the beginning of a long fortnight.
The Worms house was even more vulnerable than they'd thought, but it would be a week into the new year before they and 1,000 other Selsey households found out for themselves what the full force of nature could do.
A lot of the roofs blown off the old post office in Waterloo Road.
Are you aware of the house?
Christmas was busy for emergency services across the UK. Lancashire Fire Brigade alone received over 1,000 calls, 10 times more than usual for that period.
The roof is totally lifted off the top of the building. I just don't know what to do, darling. Can you send someone quickly? My house is blowing away.
Calm down a second. Everybody's very, very busy at the moment because everybody's got something that they're reporting.
Do you know how long it's going to be?
Winds reaching 112 miles an hour brought down trees blocking roads and toppling power wires. Electricity companies in the west heeded the forecasters and had already called in over 1,000 staff from their Christmas holidays.
Cornwall and North Devon were worst hit. SWEB's rapid response teams battled throughout the day to restore power.
But with 250,000 homes without power, Christmas lunches were ruined all over the country. For some, the cuts would last days as the high winds refused to abate. Throughout Boxing Day, the RAF search continued for survivors of the French trawler wrecked off Wales.
Sometimes you're looking for ghosts, you know that somebody might be missing, so you go looking. But when you know that there's somebody there, it's very disappointing. I don't know what the words to use for it really. You feel that you could do more, but you don't know what to do. And we unfortunately found nobody.
The 5-man crew were presumed dead. On land, dense fog and hail contributed to road accidents in which another 5 died, and a pedestrian was killed when blown into traffic by the wind. The Boxing Day death toll reached 13. Another 4 were killed in car accidents before the year was over. And on New Year's Day, a 22,000-ton oil tanker was blown onto rocks on the Devon coast. The Santa Ana, with a crew of 29, was filmed as she floundered on the rocks near Torquay. There were fears of pollution, but they pumped her fuel oil out. Coast Guards coordinated her rescue, and by the 2nd of January, she'd been towed to safety. Meanwhile, many filmed the extreme conditions outside their homes.
Boys, don't go too far in it.
There must be gusting winds of in excess of 80 miles an hour now. I'm right behind the wall of the bungalow, so I'm sheltered. But if I dare put my nose round that corner there, it's going to be very, very interesting.
Britain's coast was hardest hit. From his house overlooking Bury Port in South Wales, amateur cameraman Alf Steptoe caught the moment a powerboat sank.
I hope he's well insured. I'm one of the owners around watching it. It must be devastating for him. The top's gone. That cost a hell of a lot of money on its own, I expect. Yes, I'm glad I didn't buy a boat after all.
They call it Stormy Monday, but Tuesday's just as bad.
The Irish trawler Sonia Nancy had been at sea for 10 days after a lengthy refit in Spain and was in the Atlantic 200 miles southwest of Britain. But she developed engine trouble just as she headed into the storms.
And now the shipping forecast issued by the Met Office the 4th of January 1998. There are warnings of gales in all areas. Biscay, southwesterly 7 to severe gale 9, occasionally storm 10, increasing violent storm 11 for a time.
The 10 crew were all Spanish, apart from the Irish radio operator David Fox, who was a Spanish speaker.
Well, they were kind of worried, which I couldn't blame them, especially you're drifting in heavy seas. And she was after taking a few knocks from heavy waves, and you could feel them.
Without their engine, the crew couldn't pump out water that was now flooding into the hold. Sonia Nancy was starting to sink.
Mayday! 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 This is Sonia Nancy.
You don't make a decision of saying no, mayday. What are you going to do? Stay on board and go with it?
We're approximately 200 miles southwest of City. We're taking water and the engine's completely cut out.
The RAF launched the first of 3 long-range Nimrods from Scotland to pinpoint Sonia Nancy's position and drop life rafts to her. But to winch survivors, they needed a helicopter. The nearest was at Chivenna in Devon. But even they were over 300 miles away, well beyond their fuel limit if they were to battle against the headwinds.
It's gusting 60, 65 knots outside.
This was pretty severe weather, operating on the extreme range of the Sea King.
We're not going to get straight out there.
It was like a kid being given a puzzle. We wanted to solve it, and we were all doing our best to do exactly that.
You can go from Chivenna to Cork, Cork to Castletown, refuel Castletown, final top up, down to the boat, pick up 10 people. Ian, can you get onto Bracknell at Met Office? Yeah. Get me some accurate winds? Yeah.
The weather forecasting has improved. The forecast that we got for the route out to the Sonia Nancy was so accurate, it gave us, you know, the confidence to actually say yes, we can do the job.
That might work.
And we came up with an answer. They said go.
Part of me was excited, thinking this could be really interesting, and the other half was thinking, don't be so stupid, get on your bike and go home.
Conditions in the Atlantic continued to deteriorate. Sonia Nancy was sinking in waves now reaching over 50 feet.
Worst I've seen. And I've been up and down the Bay of Biscay for a long, long time.
When we set off, it was quite obvious that things weren't quite as easy as we thought they might be. We were having performance problems with the aircraft.
We're burning 1,500 pounds of fuel at the moment per hour. It's far more than we expected.
Our fuel burn was very high. Our ground speed was much slower than we anticipated it to be. And what was going to be the easiest leg proved to be one of the most difficult.
It was just like a cork floating. At times, between waves, it was smooth. But all of a sudden, the biggest waves I've ever seen.
The sea was white, and I don't think any of us had seen the sea like that. So I think we all sort of went very quiet and were thinking, have we done the right thing?
It took the helicopter 3.5 hours, twice as long as normal, to reach Ireland. After refuelling, they set off on the longest leg of the flight. Even with that full fuel tank, they would only have minutes for the rescue.
Roger, 122, copy.
Sonia Nancy's crew desperately tried to batten down the hatches, but she continued to take on water fast.
I was frightened then, because the amount of water that was coming over us, every time there's a big wave, there's a fierce amount of force behind that as well.
The waves were so mountainous, they even threatened the rescue helicopter, still 2 hours flying time away.
There was a lot of sea spray, even up 400 or 500 feet. And when salt accretes onto the engines become less and less efficient, so they start to work harder and harder.
The instrument that we have to measure stress on the rotor head, it normally sits at about 5%. It was regularly going up to 90%. It indicates the stresses and forces that are actually being exerted on the aircraft by the wind and the turbulence.
It feels like going over a cobblestone road. The blades are bouncing up and down. They're approaching their point where they will actually stall.
In case they got into difficulty, a backup Sea King began to follow from Anglesey in North Wales. One of the Nimrods now circled above Sonia Nancy and guided the rescue helicopter to her exact position.
We'd been in the air for 6.5 hours. The adrenaline was flowing. We were very tired, but full of apprehension as to what we were going to meet. We'd been warned that the boat may sink at any minute. It was still there, but we didn't know how long we had.
Sonia Nancy, rescue 169.
Rescue 169, this is the Sonia Nancy. We have a visual. We have a visual, yes.
Just relief all around that we'd be off within a short period, hopefully.
Sonia Nancy, rescue 169. The stage going forward of the main mast is going to cause us some trouble with winching. Any chance of cutting them away?
2 cables cut away on the bow. Yes, we understand. Pablo Alfonso! Bigger than... Nisrea Mokina and bigger those cables!
At times it was hard, because there's some words I just don't know in Spanish.
The next thing we knew, there was somebody out on the deck in these seas, holding onto an angle grinder, cutting through the wires.
He's brave.
It was really quite amazing to watch sparks flying, but he cut them away and thus made an area for us to winch on.
1 minute it was over here, and then it was over there, and it was just moving everywhere. Poor Pete, what was going through his mind, I'll never know, because he was the person who was obviously going to have to go down there.
Steady, steady, your height's good. 6 forward. Steady, rolling quite a bit, Phil. If you move in a minute, steady. Roger. Okay, ready moving. Right, 3 and forward again. Steady, just holding a couple of units short now. Just looking for a calm moment. Steady, on the deck, down 5, down 5, on the deck.
Just as his foot hit the deck, the boat took a savage roll, and he was knocked back into the safety guard.
Pete's been hit and he looked stunned.
He's been hurled on the deck here.
Up 10, up 10.
I immediately reversed the winching. We got Pete out of there very quickly.
The winchman had been so badly winded, his colleagues realised it was impossible for him to complete the rescue.
Winchman just got hurt. We're going to be operating without a winchman from now on.
Which left us with a problem. We had 10 people on a boat and wondering how we're going to get them off.
We're not letting you go down again.
Not having a winchman is against everything I've ever done. We've never rescued anybody without a winchman.
Sonia Nancy 169, roger. We will send down 2 strops. I'd like you to place the strops over the back and under the armpits of each of the survivors, 2 at a time, and then tighten the toggle down.
Yes, we're going to do that. Pablo, prende la guarda e mette su le braccia, ok? Siete fuori.
But the crew were fitting the strops wrongly.
Sonia Nancy, the survivor seems to be trying to sit in the strop. If we lift him like that, he's going to fall.
I had to come out, take the strap off and put it over his head.
Yeah, he's put the stops on properly now.
If they didn't complete the rescue in 10 minutes, the Sea King could run out of fuel on the flight home.
Coming to the door.
We lifted them 2 by 2. It took 9 minutes and we had all 10 off.
We were absolutely over the moon. We've got them all off. And the thought hit me and I thought, wow, we've done it.
You're hungry, tired. It's just a relief to get into a helicopter.
Tonight, those who helped coordinate the rescue said the men were lucky to survive such conditions.
The crew did owe their lives to David because he could speak English, because he was familiar with the techniques.
It was the worst day of my life. Waiting for the helicopter. It was a job to be done. I done it, that's all.
The pilot and winchman are to receive the RAF's highest award, the Air Force Cross, and the others the Queen's Commendation for Bravery in the Air.
Nobody on board the aircraft had been into weather conditions or sea state like it ever before, and probably will never have to again, unless we're very unlucky.
Good evening. Some of the worst storms since the 1987 hurricane have been battering southern Britain.
Motorists in Carmarthen in South Wales, where the River Towy burst its banks, were forced to abandon their cars.
Selsey in West Sussex has proved especially vulnerable. Some residents had to be evacuated.
When we're hit with the floods, it does cut off the road, so we've got no link with the mainland at all. We're an island.
As water threatened homes, hundreds of sandbags were laid by Selsey's search and rescue volunteers and the fire brigade. In all, 40 families were evacuated when the sea defences were breached.
The battle to rebuild the sea defences here has been not only a struggle of man against the elements, but also a race against time. Scores of emergency workers have used thousands of tons of shingle.
We pushed the beach up to form a bank, so that when the tide comes in, it rolls up the beach and just rolls back down again without taking too much of the stone away.
And all day they've been praying that it will be enough to protect the town of Selsey.
If the sea defence wasn't there, Selsey would end up as an island, so it must be a bit of an important job.
It's the hammerhead of cloud here that's indicative of some pretty stormy skies to come.
The weather forecast triggered 129 flood warnings on rivers, 25 in Kent and Essex. In Scotland, floodwaters reached the centre of Dumfries, while the River Severn at Gloucester burst its banks. The Gloucestershire Police helicopter found this Land Rover in the dark using its infrared camera. 2 stranded men had called for help when they became trapped. The helicopter searchlight lit the scene for a fire brigade rescue boat that brought the men to safety from the roof of their vehicle. The River Severn had also flooded at Welshpool in Wales. This video was taken outside the farmhouse of Ian and Jane Lovell. As floodwaters rose that night, they found themselves cut off and in grave danger. Jane had been home for 5 days convalescing after a month in hospital on intense chemotherapy treatment for cancer, but her condition was again causing concern.
The bone marrow transplant unit, Jane's temperature's gone up.
It was one of the worst Christmases I've ever had. Chemotherapy made me feel very sick. It makes you feel tired all the time. You don't feel like a human being anymore.
Doctors were so concerned about Jane's worsening condition, they insisted she return to hospital.
Right, you can arrange for an ambulance. Okay.
Felt very anxious when the temperature did start to rise.
I was rather worried because after chemo there's no resistance and literally even a slight chill, if it's not treated in time, can kill.
Check see what's happening with the flood water next.
To help to get to the levels through the floods, ambulance control called Welshpool Fire Brigade.
Hello, it's South and East Wales Ambulance here. What we've got is a lady in a house that is completely cut off by flood water. Could you call your Welshpool crew out?
Yeah.
And then if they can't manage, well then I'll see if we can arrange a helicopter or something.
We'd only gone 200 metres and the water was then, I would have said, a foot deep.
Okay, boys.
We put 2 of the lads on lines and they walked ahead of us because we knew they were safe because the current of water was quite strong.
I've just been looking out from upstairs and I can see a blue flashing light 200 or 300 yards from the top of the line. The biggest problem is not just the amount of water, it's the ditches.
Yeah. We found the location okay, but the fire service can't get it because it's too deep.
The water was pushing 3 foot deep, and we knew that is really as far as we could go.
So I think what I'll do is go to the farm and see if Mr. Jones will help us with this tractor.
You don't want anyone to touch you or anything, you just sort of want to go to bed and hope by the morning that the temperature and everything's gone down again.
A farmer tried to ferry the fireman and a paramedic to the levels.
How much deeper is it going to get, Bob?
He'd only got the small tractor there. If it gets too deep, we'll have to turn back.
But they were worried the engine would stall in the floodwater.
We've got our scoop stretcher because the spinal board was too long. However, what happened is one of your crew was made it to the premises on a tractor of some kind. That's right, yes.
I've got the doors open. Hello? Ambulance service? Hello? Hello?
Oh, I'm glad to see you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Faith. What's her name? Jane.
My intention was to see if we could get her back up to the ambulance on the tractor.
How did you get across?
By tractor.
Oh, right.
I'm not doing it again, though.
Oh, right.
Ever.
Is it pretty deep, is it?
It's very deep. I got wet feet.
They've managed to contact the search and rescue people. Right. They are getting a crew from RAF Valley in Anglesey. Right. They're going to get a helicopter. Right there.
The RAF pointed out it would take approximately 60 minutes to get the helicopter there because it had only recently landed after being involved with a rescue with a Spanish trawler.
You can hang in just a bit longer.
It was a surprise thinking that the RAF Sea King would be coming to take me to hospital. To me, they do sort of other things like rescuing boats and going out to sea and other things.
We were out in the field waving the torches by our head. This helped the helicopter to land.
Helicopter, come on.
When the helicopter did come down, it did look like a big spaceship arriving.
Well, I was starting to get worried whether they'd get me out or not. When they came on and said yes, they'd come, I thought, well, at long last I'll be getting out.
Jane was flown to hospital and her infection was successfully treated. She's been given the all clear for the time being. The worst of the gales have now subsided, but heavy winds and high seas have hampered efforts to repair the damage caused yesterday.
Though the storms have died down, another hazard in some parts is snow and ice. 3 people were injured when this ambulance skidded off a road as it took casualties to a Nottingham hospital.
It was a 1,000,000 to 1 chance, but for one unlucky couple travelling into Tavistock, it happened. A large tree fell directly onto their moving car.
When we saw the car under the tree, I was immediately overcome. I've been to these accidents like this before with trees down on cars and they've always been fatal.
First recollection that I had opened my eyes and there was a lot of people around. I thought I was going to die. I just said, please God, don't let me die.
I looked at the officer in charge. I looked at despair, like without saying anything, he sort of said, no, get on with it, you know.
The first rescuer began cutting branches off the tree to try and reduce its weight, estimated at over 10 tons.
It was just so unreal. You're waking up and all this commotion's going on around you and you just don't know what's happening.
I can remember the girl trying to feel my feet to see if they was alright. I can remember her saying, can you feel them? I could still feel them, but I couldn't even move, you know.
One of the firemen positioned himself so he could relay messages. Because when I was trying to examine the driver, I wanted to ascertain, obviously, what sort of feeling he had in these lower limbs. And I couldn't hear what the answers were or what was happening even when I was touching the patient.
I immediately knew that we were going to need a lot of outside help because of the sheer size of the tree.
A local builder's merchant, Edmund Kaminsky, was asked to bring his forklift truck.
So I didn't waste no time, and I went like a jet. I love it, that truck, because our truck travel fast, and I go anywhere and I lift it.
Mr. Kaminsky he's a local character, just everybody's friend. It was a nice sight to see him rolling up flat out with his head down and his hat on, getting there as fast as he could.
My forklift lifts 2.5 ton legally. Emergency, he will lift 3.5 to 4 ton.
What he did was he got his forks in under the centre of the tree and raised it up and got it really stable, making it a lot safer for everybody to work on the casualties.
And I lifted like a yo-yo, just like a yo-yo.
Edmund Kaminsky's truck couldn't lift the full weight of the tree, but he stabilised it enough for paramedics to reach Susan.
They managed to get a little gap between the patient and the tree. I crawled underneath then, examined the lady as best I could. I assumed at the very least it was going to be a fractured pelvis. There wasn't enough room to get my hands in properly. But again, the fire service had managed to get the tree up a little bit more.
A breakdown truck and logging vehicle joined the increasing number of rescuers, but the tree was still too heavy to lift. A flare was used to guide Devon Air Ambulance onto a nearby hockey pitch. Meanwhile, rescue services had found a way to get Susan out of the back of the car.
Susan was in the car for about an hour. We were extremely lucky to get Susan out as quickly as we did.
I'm so sorry.
I remember when he was lifting me out, I felt relief. I thought, if I'm going to die, I'm definitely not going to die at the side of the road.
Susan was flown to hospital where they treated multiple injuries, including a fractured skull and cheekbone and broken ribs. Michael was still badly trapped in the wreckage, pinned under the car's steering wheel, when a crane arrived after a 1-hour drive from Plymouth.
I couldn't understand where the steering wheel had gone. It had disappeared completely, and apparently it was pressing right down into his abdomen.
We were trying to untangle Michael's feet from the pedals, and while I was there, they'd cut part of the tree from above my head, and it seemed to slip. I did put my hands up. I did realise that was a bit silly, so I could hold up a tree of that size with my hands.
At last, in a combined effort, they finally managed to lift the tree away, giving the fire brigade clear access to the crushed car.
Okay, closing there, nice and steady, Jerry.
He just said, look, it's going to be noisy for a little while, but we've got to get you out, and that's it, you know. So I just sort of got used to the idea and to put up with it.
Most of the car was cut away, the roof was cut clear. It left us with a bit of space to get into him, get him out.
Once we got the tree, we still couldn't move him because we had to get the steering wheel and the steering column off him. That seemed to take an age. Michael was in the car for 3 hours.
Have a sweet day like that, lad. There you go.
They were fantastic boys, you know. One of the medics said, go and get your lottery card today on the way home. If I was you, Mike, you know, you come up with a chance in a million a day, you might be just lucky on the lottery, you know.
When they took the man out, it was wonderful. Relief, like somebody relieves your weight of your shoulder, you know? Yes, never be forgotten.
We all got around afterwards and looked at it and just still couldn't believe how anybody had survived it. It was incredible.
Michael was kept in hospital overnight, but decided to convalesce at home.
My face was smashed around. My speech is gone, really, to what it used to be. My right arm was pretty useless and still is. It's unfortunate it happened, but now it's over. I mean, I just want to put things back and try to start again, you know.
Michael was actually a taxi driver, and the car had been new that Christmas.
It had been windy before. The day before, it was terrible. When they said to me a tree had toppled over on us, I couldn't believe it.
Michael and Susan only met each other 45 minutes before the accident and had been extremely unlucky to be in the car at that moment. But Malcolm Wright, the driver of this digger here, was to be hit by something even less predictable. For 3 days he'd been rebuilding the sea wall here at Selsey. What Malcolm and no one else here knew was that 10 miles away on the Isle of Wight they were experiencing an astonishing weather phenomenon. Severe thunderstorms on top of warm seawater created exactly the right conditions for spawning tornadoes. One of them had even been caught on video. Britain actually gets about 40 tornadoes like this a year. but capturing one on video is extraordinary, as they last only minutes and usually develop away from towns. Selsey's diggers were still working 24 hours a day on the 7th of January, as most of the town was asleep, and Malcolm Wright began his night shift.
It came on at 10 o'clock, and it was raining, thunder and lightning, which wasn't too bad. The thunder and lightning was, you know, quite calm for thunder goes, but then lightning got worse and the thunder was worse.
I've never heard a thunderclap like it. It was above my house, it sounded. And it was so loud, the whole house shook.
Well, a friend of mine had come down, and he turned up at 11:30 at night, having been held up on traffic. He hadn't had anything to eat. The local Indian restaurant, only 500 yards up the road, we went up there to have a curry. And we got in there, we ordered a drink, we sat down at the corner, and we was chatting away. Not the usual Celtic weather, I'm afraid.
As I turned, there's a tremendous noise. The window came straight in. As I opened the door, with the force of the wind coming in, blew me straight at the door. The tornado just comes from nowhere. I mean, if you can imagine an express train, I suppose it'd be similar to that. I mean, twice the sound of it. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
I can only describe it as if somebody was outside with a sledgehammer. I looked up and I could actually see the curtain just going with every shot, and within a split second there was just this horrendous smashing of glass. I can see that the wall's gone. Naomi's cot is teetering on the edge of this. What used to be the wall is now just dropped down into our next door neighbour's garden.
The tornado reached the centre of Selsey in a matter of seconds, leaving a path of devastation, including one of Patrick Moore's telescopes.
We were just about finished our meal when we found the wind was getting abnormally strong. And stronger and stronger, and then suddenly everything happened at once. A mighty rushing wind, everything began to shake, noise like machine gun fire, actually hail of course. And then suddenly the door burst open with a tremendous bang. Into the centre of the room. So we dashed into the middle of the room and things came pouring into the door. You see that pressure drop? This really is a genuine tornado. Absolutely no warning at all, like being under an air raid. Most extraordinary.
There was blood everywhere, and I looked on the wall and there was blood on the wall. I shakily dialed for the emergency services.
Thank you, Fabergé, can I help you?
Yes, there's a storm that's hit my house. I live in Selby. Kind of half of my upstairs house has just disappeared. The glass has shattered over me.
Right.
Blood everywhere at the moment.
Right, okay, we're on our way to you.
When we got to the actual property, you could see that there was something amiss, and then when we put the lights on, of course, you could see there was no end of the house. It had gone.
Fabergé.
Hello, we've been struck by lightning.
The gentleman's windows are all blown out and he's got water coming through his roof. We think we've been struck by lightning because the chimney's come off.
There was over 1,000 calls. The people making the calls were very upset. They were shocked, they were scared, they were frightened, and they wanted assistance.
I don't know if you've heard any other reports. We just had either a tornado or something come through here. A major part of the chimney breast is actually just suspended at a very precarious position.
It just went ballistic. It just came in from nowhere.
Huge, great big hailstones, and the windows just started to, like, go.
Undescribable. It's like something you see in a film.
It was really, really powerful. The pressure that it created was unbelievable.
We've lost all of the back of the roof. The wind went straight in through the flat kitchen window and straight out the front window.
It was just horrendous. It was in, what, about 8 seconds.
What do you say, it's a mini tornado? Taking hundreds of tiles off the roof.
It looked like a bomb had hit the place. There was tiles missing from everywhere. There was people running around.
We've been hit by a thunderbolt. The garages at the end of the garden have blown up.
We've also heard that you've had a mini tornado.
Is that what it is?
We're en route to Selby en masse at the moment.
It's the worst journey in I've ever had.
Dangerous structure, East Street, ladders. Ladders!
East Street.
Right, the High Street pool, rubble everywhere.
It was quite an experience going through the High Street. There's quite a lot of debris still.
Mind that tree?
Whatever we were going to at the time, we weren't really sure. We knew that it was fairly severe.
At the height of the incident, we had a region of 150 firefighters down at Selsey, 20 fire engines, 4 special appliances.
An incident command unit joined the growing number of rescue vehicles in Selsey. It's designed to coordinate the biggest of disasters.
It's where we log calls, we can look in there for data about water supplies, identify where the calls are, in this particular case where the tornado took its path.
Fire Brigade, no one at Selsey.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's West Ham's caravan site.
Oh dear.
Their front hair's been flattened.
Fire Brigade, got one for you. Yeah, go ahead. It would appear the chimney's come through the roof. There's some sort of gas leak.
The fire brigade worked through the night, making the area safe.
By the time that the sun was coming up in the morning, then we could literally see just how extensive this was, and you could see that it was more of a salvage operation than a rescue operation.
Remarkably, the tornado had claimed no lives, but in daylight the path of destruction was clear. 1/5 of all properties in Selsey was damaged, and repairs were to cost £2.5 million. Jeremy Wern alone had a repair bill of £48,000. But he was lucky his family hadn't been in the house with him when the tornado struck.
Gaining strength as it moved eastwards. It caused damage to the Isle of Wight before smashing into Selsey.
When I woke up the following morning, I turned on breakfast news on the television.
1,000 homes were damaged as the tornado ripped in from the west.
And I can remember being totally stunned at the images that were coming out from the screen.
It was all over in a devastating 2 minutes.
What at first I thought was very sad, somebody had had damage to their house. The realisation dawned that, in fact, I recognised the wallpaper as being ours. And I will never forget the emotion that went through me at looking at the house and seeing the devastation. But of course, in that shot, there was no sign of Jeremy.
I think I was immensely lucky. The noise of the windows getting smashed, I've got to go now, honestly.
And then what happened?
I got out fast.
I've had my 15 minutes of fame. I don't want it to happen again, thanks.
There's just nothing like it. Nothing like it at all. With the force of the wind coming through there, I was forced out of the cab.
I had a few bumps on the head, but that was about it. I mean, a little bit of metal damage, I think, but I mean, apart from that.
People say, can you predict tornadoes? Answer, no, you can't. You don't know where it's going, don't know when it's going to stop, or what path it's going to take. My weather vane has survived, I'm glad to say. What I didn't see was the second observatory. In point of fact there, the roof had been taken completely off, and the wall that separates the garden from the next one, hello, that had been blown down.
Gosh, isn't it?
Had that been 20 yards further east, it would have gone right through the house, and that would have been total and utter disaster. So Selsey's back to normal. I say, we don't want another tornado, thank you. One will do.
Patrick Moore's observatory is now being repaired. However high-powered his telescopes might have been, they couldn't have seen the tornado coming. Improved weather forecasting, though, did give the emergency services advance warning of the high winds and the flooding, so that they could respond better to the most extreme weather conditions for nearly a decade. But the New Year storms caused more than £300 million worth of damage, and sadly, more than 30 people died.
The predictions of the way we would live at the end of the century, did any come true or were they all complete rubbish? Griff Rhys-Jones investigates next on BBC One.
One thing that has changed is the name of the restaurant. It's now the Selsey Tornado Tandoori Restaurant.